Your opponents will rage, they'll lose and won't even understand what's going on, because today we're gonna talk about the most disrespectful chess opening called the Duras Gambit. And I've added 2 exclamation marks, of course not for the objective strength of the move, it's rather the opposite, but for the shocking effect it has on your opponent. Now, f5 is literally the worst first move you could possibly play. Now, you're hitting 2 birds with 1 pawn. You're giving up a pawn for no reason, and you're exposing your king, making it vulnerable to all sorts of attack. But you don't stop here. After this, you continue playing these dumb and dumber chess by going king to f7. Not only you gave up material, now you expose your king, and your opponent can easily attack it from whatever angle he wants, or he can jump forward with a knight. It feels like white should be able to checkmate you within the next couple moves, but actually it's a deceptive feeling, because in reality none of those quick attacks work for white, and if they try doing so, it actually backfires. For example, if your opponent tries the most natural move and the most played move, queen h5 check. Again, it feels like white is about to checkmate you within a couple moves, but you go pawn g6 and you cover. So far your opponent is still happy, he captures the pawn, exposing your king further. Moreover, you can't even recapture this pawn because that would hand the rook on h8. Therefore, you play king to g7. Quite an impressive home run by the king, and after this capture, you then recapture by the rook, and will reach a very unusual and quite an impressive position, where you consecutively sacrificed all the pawns of your potential casting. However, your king is surprisingly safe and is going to hide right here in the corner of the board. For example, if your opponent delivers some check, you just literally hide right there. And again, that is a very impressive maneuver. Like, not always you can have this king march right at the start of the game while not defending any of your pieces, and that is something totally mind-boggling. However, your position is much more resilient than it seems. For example, let's say he plays bishop d3. He wants to get away from this rook, and as it goes somewhere, he wants to checkmate you. For example, if the rook goes here, he'll play queen h5, and indeed white is just winning the game straight away. However, you surprise them by going bishop to h6, and it is actually a very common tactical pattern here. Since they have their queen exposed, you then gain temples by attacking it, and in fact, that's the beginning of your counterattack. Now, let's say he tries to pursue the same plan and goes queen h5. Now, he's still hoping for your rook to move away, that would expose your king. But now you upset them by bishop takes d2, the first little trick. That is a check to their king, and on the next move you grab the queen. Game over, you won. Alright, let's say your opponent plays something else instead, does now blunder their queen. The most played move and the most tempting move is queen e5 check. Now it feels once again that they're putting strong pressure onto you. However, this is once again a false impression. You just play rook g7. While removing your rook from this danger, you also cover your king, and your king is actually surprisingly safe here in the corner, surrounded by the defenders. Also, your rook is well placed here, while right now it is pinned, but in the long run is going to put pressure towards their king side. Also, the only truly vulnerable piece in this position is surprisingly their queen, and you're going to gain temples attacking it. For example, after whatever move of white, you then play knight c6, gaining 1 more tempo, hitting the queen. Usually they play queen c3, trying to maintain this pin, because if not, again, they have to even worry about rook takes g2. And now you play pawn e5. Another strong and surprising move, and you start taking over. And that is a very common scenario for the Duras Gambit, where initially you play this completely unhinged opening, it feels like you're about to lose the game quickly, but while your opponent tries to attack you, it doesn't work out and you start taking over. So the purpose of e5 is that you close this pin, therefore your rook is no longer pinned. It's free to go ahead and capture something. Also, just establish your central presence. Capturing this pawn is yet another common error of white, because then you play queen e7, and because of this pin, the knight cannot be defended and cannot run away. What can white do? They can't play f4 because your bishop controls this square. Otherwise, the knight can be defended. Let's say they castle, you just go ahead and grab the knight. Now you're up a piece, plus, again, surprisingly, you are the one attacking. That's pretty cool. Like, you've got this really strong rook targeting their king. If they try, let's say, to pin your knight and do that counter pin, yeah, you just pinned their knight and moved before, and now they try to do the same onto you, but you respond to this tactic by a counter tactic with this knight to f3, discovered attack that's checked to their king. The pawn is pinned, can't take the knight, but if the king moves, then you grab the rook, and that is again a quick checkmate. Alright, let's see what else can your opponent come up with. By the way, Magnus Carlsen surprisingly played the Duras Gambit at least twice. created absolute madness and won both games. So it's again much trickier than it seems. There's one trick that your opponent can try to pull off against you. That is, instead of capturing this pawn, that is to play queen h5 check straight away. You cover, but then they play a mysterious move bishop e2 that feels almost like a mouse slip, but of course, in reality, it is a trap. Do not take here on h5, it is the most played move, and obviously a big blunder. That's what white is hoping for. This would lead to this nasty quick checkmate delivered by a bishop, and you do not want to be on the losing side of this miniature. Instead, just don't take the queen. It's pretty simple. Basically, any other meaningful move would be great for black. Let's say knight f6, now you hit the queen twice, they have to move, and this whole idea failed. They just lost a pawn for nothing. You have a great position. Alright, and let's explore the second main line here. After white accepts your gambit, and then you boldly play king to f7. By the way, you really reached quite an anti-accomplishment. So by now, within just 2 moves, you got to -3, and it's pretty hard. Really, if you try hard, there are not many options at all to worsen your position so much within just 2 moves. Now, besides queen to h5, which leads to that truly spectacular variation, another very natural attempt of white is bishop c4 check. However, in most cases, this is associated with just a blunder. Basically, they overlook the fact that you can go d5, hit the bishop, and the pawn is guarded by the queen. Therefore, although it was tempting, but in reality was just a waste of time. Now, in most cases, they're going to just move the bishop back, and now what they did is basically they helped you to put your pawn to the center, they opened up this diagonal for your bishop, and they wasted some time. Pretty cool. Now, the only thing is you should not capture this pawn straight away. That would be a blunder, because after this, they have this strong move queen to f3, attacking everything, kind of similar to the fried liver attack in a way, and you're in trouble. So do not take this pawn straight away, but just play knight f6 first to cover your king, also to cover this h5 square, and now you're good. After this, they play whatever, you then grab the pawn, and although objectively speaking, white is still better because your king is a little bit exposed, but of course, it's already quite a massive accomplishment, and chess accomplishment in terms of your position is now not too bad, it's totally playable, but also psychologically. You play these totally unhinged, absolutely absurd opening at first, bringing, trolley to the next level, and your opponent couldn't do anything to you. So that already feels quite good to you if you reach this position. In reality, there is a way for white to obtain advantage, of course. However, it's much trickier than it seems. Here after d5, instead of playing that instinctive move, retreating the bishop, they should play queen h5 check here, attacking your king. As always in the Duras Gambit, we go g6, and after white captures, you then play king to g7, and now there is a move that gives white an advantage. However, actually only a little minority of players played it. The majority played something wrong. For example, the most played move here is bishop takes d5. Again, they feel like they're destroying your position, but in fact it's a blunder, because after knight f6, you're turning the table. Now that's a double attack to the queen and bishop, plus the bishop is attacked by your queen as well, and you're taken over. Say they play queen e5, the most played move, you now just grab the bishop. Now you're up a piece, and the best for them is just to go to this losing endgame for white, being a piece down, and if they insist on being aggressive, then after queen takes g2, they just lose the game straight away. You grab the rook on the next move, they can't defend it from there, you're gonna attack the knight and the king, and that's totally winning now. Another popular move by white here is queen to e5 check, again, attempting an attacking move, however, that doesn't do anything, you just cover by your knight. That also helps you to guard this pawn on d5, therefore they can't capture it anymore, they'll have to move the bishop away, and then you can just get your pawn back, plus you activate your rook, you're ready to play knight c6 and hit the queen, then maybe e5, and you're actually having a pretty nice position here. So the move that gives white an advantage, and that is sort of a refutation of the Duras Gambit, is queen takes d5. And after this, black has nothing better than trading queens and going into this endgame where you are 2 pawns down. You could also throw the knight out and hit the bishop, but after this, anyway, you'll have to play this endgame position where you're 2 pawns down and technically winning. However, in reality, again, usually it kind of feels like a psychological accomplishment to you, because as you expose your king so badly right on the second move, your opponent feels obligated to checkmate you, and otherwise it feels like your gambit, your weird opening worked out. And therefore, I mean, although objectively that is sort of a refutation, but realistically your opponents will not be happy about that. They wanted to checkmate you and they failed, and again, very few of them will even find this variation. There's a fun fact about this position. Stockfish would tell you that it is +3 for white, kinda totally winning. However, if you look at the stats of the games, black actually won more games than white in this position. Could you believe that? That just goes to show how tricky it is, and let's face it, your opponents are not stockfish. They're going to play most natural attacking moves that usually fail. Nevertheless, needless to say that it's a risky opening. Don't try this at home, and all other disclaimers. So, if you want to keep it a little bit more solid, there is actually a way to do that. You just a little bit revert the moves here, and after e4, you begin by playing knight to c6. And in most cases, your opponents are going to play knight to f3, trying to get it back to usual lines that they're familiar with. Of course, they could also theoretically play d4. In that case, you can counter with e5, and I've got another video about this. This is also a pretty nice attacking opening for black, but in most cases, they're going to go knight to f3. And here, once again, you play f5, totally violating all opening rules. Now, hit their center, give up a pawn. However, this version of the Duras Gambit is actually much more solid. The difference is their knight on f3 that prevents them from playing queen h5 check, which makes it far less dangerous for you to play this. Moreover, after d5, you are ready to get this pawn right on the next move. And although, like, yes, you weakened your position a little bit, but this is totally playable. And again, it's a very provocative opening. You bait your opponent into thinking that you're doing something totally wrong, and they're trying to punish you for doing so, right? They do not want to let you just develop your bishop and get a pawn back. Therefore, they'll often be tempted to play either something like bishop d3, guarding pawn that way, or pawn g4. And both of these moves are pretty bad mistakes. So if they go bishop d3, now the problem is, yes, temporarily they guard this pawn, but you insist on capturing it back by going knight h6, adding the second attacker, and on the next move you are ready to play bishop takes f5 because it's supported by the knight. If they insist on trying to guard this pawn, then what can they do? Like, they can't go here because that square is guarded by your knight. Therefore, the only move for them would be to play knight h4, trying to guard the pawn that way. However, it feels good for white for the moment because they think, aha, not only I'm a pawn up, I'm also going to play queen h5 next and attack you. But at this point, they're already basically lost. You just play e5, a very strong counter. Notice that it's a surprising discovered attack of their knight. That's the thing that they overlooked. And this pawn, of course, is ready to go forward and kick away this bishop. Now, they're still feeling optimistic because they've got this move queen h5 check, which they intended to play anyway. However, that doesn't do much. First of all, you could have easily played knight to f7, and you're fully covered after that. You've got a great position. But if it's even stronger to play g6, which leads to a totally mind-boggling variation. You attack their queen, like totally expose your king. Your opponent still feels like, you know, he's about to push the pawn forward, deliver this discovered check and win the game. But you've got bishop g4, another unexpected surprise, and that hits the queen. And the queen is actually trapped. It has nowhere to go. So they have to play g7 if they wish to, you know, save their queen. So basically they lose this one, but they got the other one on h8. However, at the end of this file, you put one more piece to the h file, kind of like you tried hard to put as many pieces as possible along the h file, and you achieved that successfully. And you're totally winning here. Like, you're up a piece, you're ready to castle queenside, you have huge lead in development, massive center, and it's just totally winning. Another try for your opponents to guard this pawn on f5 is to play g4. Again, looks pretty strong at first. They're having this pawn chain that locks your bishop out, and also they're just maintaining their extra pawn. But you play h5 and undermining. Now, what can they do now? They don't want to split up their pawns, and after this you just get this one back, this pawn on h5 will fall inevitably, and you actually have a great position. Therefore, they'll try something else. They'd wish to play pawn h3 and just protect this pawn, but it fails tactically because after they trade, they're gonna lose the rook on h1. Another little trick. Let's take it back. Therefore, the only move for them actually to somehow maintain these pawns would be to play bishop h3. A little bit ugly, but I think it's the most played move here actually by white. But after this, you trade, and then you play knight f6, gaining one more tempo, hitting this bishop. What can they do now? The bishop actually has nowhere to go. It can't retreat because your rook guards this square. They can't play h3 because after they trade, once again, they're gonna lose a piece thanks to this pin. Therefore, they'll have to play something else. Let's say knight to g5. Again, I believe the most played move. And here you have a very surprising way to rush into your counterattack. You play queen d6, and that is an attack of this pawn on h2, which is a threat that they see. But besides that, there is one more threat that they don't see. After they play pawn h3, trying to like cement their position, you then come up with queen f4. Quite a surprising move. It attacks the knight, and that is the most obvious thing. However, if they do whatever to guard the knight, for example, d3 looks pretty cool, not only x-raying the knight, but also attacking your queen. Let this actually be a puzzle of the day. So far, I've been talking, now it's a little warm-up for you. Please think about this, and if you can't find winning continuation for black, please write it down in comments below. It might feel a little overwhelming to see all these variations because you may think like there's no way I can remember all that. And of course, that is totally unnecessary. Like, I just want to show you those typical attacking patterns, typical plans of the Duras Gambit, and let's not forget that your opponent probably knows nothing about it at all. But even more importantly is just to develop those attacking skills of yours, which will work out in any positions that you play. And if you wish to become a strong attacking player and know how to find those attacking moves on your own without relying on memorization, I'd recommend that you check out my free masterclass by clicking the link up there or down below in the description. Also, whenever you play Duras Gambit, know that you ruin people's lives and their self-esteem, but it's okay sometimes.